All right, cool. Let's have a look. Maybe if I start sharing my screen. Now I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to pop back into YouTube, see what that looks like. All right, cool. Let's have a look. Is this going to work? Maybe if I start sharing my screen. Now I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to pop back into YouTube, see what that looks like. All right, cool. Let's have a look. Is this going to work? Maybe if I start sharing my screen. So, jump into YouTube. This is all brand new to me, so I apologize. So that. So just testing things out. I'm going to jump into some of that. Just testing things out. I'm going to jump into some of that. Sweet. Okay. So I think this is working okay. There's a bit of a lag with my phone. I'm going to get rid of that because that might be confusing things. Sweet. Okay. So this is a live stream of some photo editing. These are all images that I've taken in the past shoots, some recently, some a little while ago. And I'm just going through some editing while I'm here in Spain, and I thought it would be a good experiment to try and broadcast this live for you guys, and then you can see how I go about editing my images. So we'll just crack straight on with it. This is one I took on a beach in Australia, which I miss very much. A fantastic place to shoot. I'm hoping to get back there soon. This was actually shot on an OMD EM5 Mark II, which I no longer have. But here's the metadata, just if it interests you. So it was a number of years ago, back in March 2018. I love this shot. I have edited it already, and I have shared that on social media and stuff in the past. But it's a good one to show how you can take photos from one extreme to the other. As it looks at the moment, it's pretty bland. The light was no good. It was, the middle of the day. But what was catching my eye was this water breaking over this rock. And the rock is really dark and black. And the water rushing back over it was quite white and disturbed. And it makes a nice contrast of image. There's a lot to do with the editing here. There are some marks here from the splashes, from the waves. So there's quite a lot to do. So it's a good one to show you some quite dramatic editing. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this to black and white, and I'm going to adjust the crop because none of that is working for me at the moment. It doesn't work as a color photo. You can see it's really bland and boring. So I'm a big fan of 16:9 when it comes to landscape photography. And the interest here really is the rocks. There's not much interest in the background. There's not even much interest in the sky either, although the clouds do complement the rock formations quite nicely. Am I going to adjust the level of the horizon? I am going to adjust that a little bit, not too much. I'm just going to tweak it just so that horizon line just is a little bit more aesthetically pleasing across the back of the frame. So that's pretty much all I'm going to do with the crop and the straightening. This is all being done in Lightroom, by the way. It's my favorite editing software. I'm going to go to the presets, and Lightroom has this really cool feature where it will recommend some presets, or if you are a subscriber to Lightroom, you get their premium range of presets as well, and you can also bring in your own. So I'm going to go black and white. Black and white landscape, see what that looks like. It's a bit too bright for me. High contrast looks good. Punch, oh, punch is quite nice. I quite like what that has done to the detail. We're going to bear that one in mind, definitely. Flat, no. Soft is not going to work. Infrared, no. Sepia, no. Split tone, no, definitely doesn't work. I really like punch. I think that's done a great job. So I'm going to start off with that. I'm not going to leave it just as at the preset, but I'm definitely going to start off there. So first thing that's really putting me off are these water droplets. So I'm going to go up here to the plaster, which is the healing. Which is the healing brush, and I'm going to go heal. So you can go heal or clone. I am going to go heal, and I'm going to get a relatively large healing brush, about the same size as the water droplets. So that all I need to do is click on it, and it will get rid of those water droplets, and it will match it as closely as it can to something around that area. So yeah, this could be an interesting one because of the house. I'm just going to kind of rejig that a little bit just so it doesn't look quite so obvious. That's pretty good. Am I going to change this one up here? Yeah, that looks better. There's a spot over here that I don't quite like. That's probably about it, you know. That looks pretty good now. What I love about editing on the iPad is I can zoom in and see things in a little bit more detail. It means that I can get really into the imagery. I really like what that preset has done. But for me, it's a little bit too bright in some areas. As I said, the interest is really down here. I find the sky is kind of distracting at the moment. So I'm going to go into these masking options here. Now, Lightroom have brought out a few new masking options, one of which is select sky. So this is going to automatically detect what it thinks is the sky. You can see it's done a really good job. So everything that is red is now the only thing that's being affected when I make an edit, which is really cool. Because it does actually miss out this area here. It's just selected what it thinks is the sky, and normally it does a really good job. The other way of doing this is to use a linear gradient, and we'll have a look at how that works in a second. But yeah, so now the only thing that's being affected is the sky. So you can see as I drop the exposure, I'm going to bring some mood into that sky. And that's darkened it down, and that has just taken our eye away from the sky because that's a lot darker now. It's brought our eye down onto these rocks. I want a bit of contrast in there. That's just going to help darken things up. I'm going to drop the highlights because I don't really want it distracting from down the bottom. I'm not going to do anything with shadows, not really. I'm going to drop the whites a little bit, and I'm going to maybe crush the blacks a bit as well. I'm really bringing the attention in to the rocks down in the foreground of the scene here. That might be a bit too much, maybe. This is a great thing with sliders. You just basically move them around. Sometimes you can go to an extreme and then bring it back, which helps your eye as well. So something around there. I think that's pretty good. All right. Now, what should we do next? there's something about this middle ground that I don't quite like. I don't think there's enough contrast between this section and the foreground. I want there to be a real contrast between the two. So I'm actually going to go back into the mask and I'm going to create a new mask and I'm going to use a brush. I'm going to get a brush that's going to enable me to paint in behind the rocks here. So first off, you select your brush size. So I'm going to use a brush size about that big. Now we're looking at the feather. The feather is the edge. So if we go all the way to 0, then there's no blending going on. It's just a solid edit. So wherever the end of the circle is, the edge of the circle, that is where your editing will stop. If you use a feather, then you get the most editing going on in the middle of the circle, and then it blends itself out towards the edges, and you can see it just kind of, as the name would suggest, feathers things in to its environment. So I'm going to go for a feather around about 60-ish, and the flow is how intense the edit is actually going to be throughout the circle. So I'm going to go for a flow of probably around about 60-ish as well. Now I'm going to use this brush to paint in just at the back of these rocks here. So you can see that where I'm painting now with the cursor is the only place that these edits is going to take place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the light. I pretty much always start off with light, and I'm going to bring the exposure down a little. You can see it looks a bit funky at the moment, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about that. Just at the moment, we're just going to do some basic edits. And then what I'm going to do next will help to get rid of this weird looking bit in the background. So that's fine. Now I'm going to go to the eraser. Okay. I'm going to increase the size a little bit, and I'm going to use the eraser to just take out the mistakes that I made with the brush previously. So that looked a little bit better to me. I think I prefer that. So this is where we're up to at the moment. This is how it started, and this is how we look at the moment. Quite a difference. It's looking pretty good. Right, now then, I just want to edit the foreground now. And luckily for me, there's a nice line going along here. So it will act as a good breaker for the edits that I'm going to do next. So this is where the linear gradient is going to come in. And I'm going to draw the line up to the top of these rocks. And I'm going to bring that all the way to the top of the rocks. Cool. And again, I pretty much always start off with light. So I'm just going to bring the overall exposure down on that. Contrast, what do I want to do with the contrast? I am going to boost the contrast a little bit. I'm really liking the way this is coming on. We've dropped the highlights a little bit so I get a little bit more detail out of the whites. Shadows, do I want to boost the shadows at all? I think I do. I just want to bring out some clarity, but I'm actually going to crush the blacks. So I'm going to make them a little bit more extreme. This is looking pretty good now. Right. Do I want to do anything else to that? I don't think so. I'm going to get rid of the linear gradient because the linear gradient line is just throwing off my eye a bit at the moment because it looks like the foreground's on a tilt, even though the horizon is straight. I don't know if you're picking that up as well. Back to the healing brush because I've just spotted another thing that I want to just take out. There we go. That looks better. And actually, there's one down in the bottom of the foreground as well. So just here. Go. Always spotting those things. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I quite like that. I'm gonna leave that one as it is. What I tend to do is do a lot of editing and then leave the image and come back to it later on and just let my eye adjust to something else, and I'll come back to this and see how it looks. But at the moment, I'm really liking how that is coming along. There's a lot of contrast in it. And there's more detail than I remember from this image as well, so it's good. So that's how we started. And that's where we are at the moment. So quite a dramatic edit. Cool. Okay, let's do something else. Let's have a look at something with a bit of color in it. So this is an image that I shot very recently. Crook Peak in Somerset. I was up there for sunrise. It was a lovely sunrise. What I was disappointed in was there weren't that many compositions that I could see. It was a lovely spot. You got a 360-degree view, but yeah, you just there's not really much up there to photograph. So I saw this lone tree, and I thought it was quite cool and gnarly the way it's growing up out of the limestone rock here. The light was hitting it quite dramatically. Beautiful lighting, and I thought this might work. So let's have a little go at this. The exposure I'm quite happy with. I do want to get a little bit of detail out of the sky. So again, I'm going to go into the masking. I'm going to use the select sky option. It's done a really good job again. Exposure, I'm going to bring the exposure down a touch. There we go. I'm going to go straight into the color and the saturation and just see what boosting the saturation does. Let's have a look at the white balance as well. Do you know what? I'm going to cool the temperature down a little bit. I'm going to add a bit of magenta in. So just a bit of a tint. Not too much. If you go too far, it looks really fake. So you've got to be careful with saturation as well, that you don't go too far with saturation. You go too far here and it looks really fake. So yeah, that's pretty good. Go back into the light and I'm going to make a little bit more of the highlights and the whites. So I just want to bring this back to a bit more of a natural feeling than the color adjustments give me. So the color can be a little bit fake. So by boosting whites in skies, when you've got a little bit of cloud cover there, it just helps to bring back a bit of a natural feeling. So how does that look now? That's the before and that's the after, just a little bit nicer. Cool, so we get rid of the sky edit. Overall, the light's pretty good. Do I want a bit more contrast in there? Whoa, a bit too much, maybe. Maybe I want to drop the contrast a little bit, do I? I think I do. I think I want to drop the contrast. It just helps to bring out the kind of strawy grass a little bit. I don't want to go too mad with it. This is what it looks like. So before the edit and then with the edit. And you can see up here, it's just helping the histogram out a little bit as well. This is leaning all the way to the left at the moment. So the left is your darks. So if the histogram's all the way over to the left, it means you've got more information going on in the dark areas, the shadows. And if it's all the way to the right, you've got more information going on in the highlights. So what you want is a histogram that's got a nice even balance throughout the histogram, but without any peaks on the left, any peaks on the right. So you really want to get these peaks, these lines starting from each edge or just inside of them. You don't want peaks because that means you've got too much information going on. So overall, the exposure, if we set that to 0, it's pretty good. You can see it's leaning slightly towards the shadows, but I'm actually going to boost the shadows a bit. That helps to bring out information from the shadows as opposed to lightening up the whole scene. If I drop the contrast, you can see that it's bringing the peaks up a little bit, so it's boosting that information. If I boost the whites a bit, you can see that that brings the histogram over slightly as well. But more importantly, I'm looking at the image. I'm watching the image, watching the changes going on in real time and deciding whether or not they're working for me. I think that does. And you can see that actually by editing individual components, I've achieved a more technically correct histogram, I suppose you could say, but without having to edit the whole exposure, because the exposure is actually pretty good. It's just that the dynamic range, which is the difference between highlights and shadows, wasn't really that spot on. So that's what we've done. Anyway, overall color, again, I'm going to just have a little look at the white balance here. So you could see I could go either way with this. I could go a really warm image And you could see how that would work with a little bit more tweaking, or I could go a really cold image and you can see how that would work as well. I think the camera did a pretty good job of capturing this with a decent white balance. I'm going to go to daylight on the white balance, not much of a change. Shade looks pretty good to me. I think I'm going to set it at shade, and then so it just warms it up a little bit. And then I'm actually going to add a little bit of magenta in the tint as well. Not too much, just a little bit. This is before the edit. This is after. Before, after. And you can see it's just bringing out a little bit more detail throughout the whole scene. So yeah, I'm liking that. Right, what else do I want to do? I'm going to do a bit of dodge and burn in. So dodge and burn is basically dark and light edits. And what I want to do is bring out a little bit more information in the tree here. So I'm going to create a brush, just like we did in the last photo. And feather's pretty good. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush to brush the tree, just the top of the tree. And I'm going to boost its exposure a little bit. Just have to be a bit careful not to do it too much because it looks really weird. Just going to lighten that up a little. Pretty good. Boost the highlights, boost the shadows, just to bring some more information out, just to get it to stand out a little bit. Go back to the eraser. Just gonna nip around the edge, just so we get rid of that weird cast that we had going on there. Excuse me. And let's bring the brush back, and I'm going to use those same edits. You can see this is helping them to just brighten up rocks and that. Your eye will go to the brightest part. See, your eye will go to the brightest part of the scene. So you want to make sure that the things you want your viewer to be looking at is brighter than the rest. A bit I'm going to use rocks down here as well. This shadow area, just off. There we go. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Before, after, before, after. You can see it's just lifted that a little bit. So again, I'm just going to leave that where it is for now. And go into something else. Let's do something a little bit more extreme. Let's jump into this one. So same shoot, but the sun was up above the horizon by this point. And you can see I've got loads of healing to do. So we'll start there. This is as good a place as any. Let's make sure that our healing brush is a decent size to be covering off all of these marks. I'm going to jump into here and just start getting rid of all of these distracting marks. Okay. I'm going to leave that there for now because what we really need to do is get the information out of here. So when you're shooting landscapes, you'll very often have a brighter sky than you do foreground. Now, even though I used a filter, of a neutral density graduated filter on the top half of the lens to darken that sky down a little bit, I still wasn't able to get in one shot a correct exposure to match the sky to the landscape. So you can see that from the histogram. You can obviously tell that from the image as well. So having shot this in RAW, what I can do is boost the shadows, and you can see I've brought back loads of information. So this is how it was shot. And when I lift the shadows, I get all of this information come back, which is great. I can drop the highlights. That does a weird thing to the sun, but it does help to bring back a bit of information from the shadows as well. If I boost the blacks, then that will bring out even more information. And then what I can do is get a brush. So select a brush here. It's going to be a relatively large brush. And I'm going to start brushing this foreground here, which is really dark. Okay, nice big selection, go into my exposure, and I'm going to lift that exposure right up. Now you can see by doing that, I've brought back loads of information, but I've also got loads of areas that I now need to do some healing on. So this is really a process of, you do one thing, you come back and do another. So Daisy, we don't want that, we want that. Okay, jump in here and start doing some healing. You can see that sometimes it doesn't match. So it can be a bit of kind of trial and error until you get something that does actually look accurate, if you like. Just double click on it and get rid of those ones. You can paint and edit instead. Try and lift that up. How's that looking? It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It will do for the purposes of this exercise anyway. So yeah, just wanted to kind of show you the kind of dramatic edits that you can do. Do some smaller healing here. It's pretty good. Let's do some overall editing then. Add some contrast maybe. Yeah, we'll add a little bit of contrast, just bring things out a little bit. What do we think about the color? Quite like a bit of a cooler image for this, I think, a bit cooler. But maybe add in some magenta. I think that's a little too cold. Generally speaking, the OMD does a great job with white balance. So how's that looking? Not too bad. Unfortunately, a few too many areas that would need to be healed, too many specks and things. But for a before and after of some pretty dramatic editing, you can see the techniques coming into play, working really nicely. So that's pretty good. Quite like that. All right, let's finish off with this one. Quite appropriate for this time of year. Nice firework shoot the other night. And this is pretty cool because these fireworks are going off quite near this house. So let's have a look, see what we can do here. So let's boost the shadows a bit, see if we can bring any information out. I'd quite like to make the house a little bit more obvious in the scene. It's getting there. Do we need to do anything with exposure? Yeah, so what we'll do is set the exposure to 0, grab a brush. You can see I'm a big fan of brushes. Relatively big brush, that's a bit too big though. I'm going to paint the house, yeah. And then I'm going to lift the exposure of the house. And probably all the way, grab the razor, delete that bit out. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Just going to go through, bring out the house a little bit. Okay, and then the bits that we don't want, Yeah, bush, not too keen on, not too keen on that bit at the bottom. And obviously around the night sky here, not too keen on that either. So just going to take that out. Go back to the brush, make it a little smaller. And then try and reveal that house as best we can. So you can see it's a matter of going around and around and around and around until you get it looking good. There we go. Okay. It's a bit weird down the side here, so we'll just blend the roof back in a little bit. And then what we'll do, the exposure is pretty extreme, so we'll just drop that a little bit, and this edge looks a bit fake, but whatever. Just can't get that bit right. There we go. And it's a bit too extreme, so I don't know how much I like it. Don't know how much I like it. Maybe there we go. You can tell the house is there. Not too bad. All right, let's do some stuff with the fireworks then. So we're done with that brush. Let's go to the color. I think I'll cool this down, bring out a bit more of the blues in the firework. Where do I want to go with the tint? Not too much, just a little boost, vibrancy. Increase that a little bit, saturation. We've got to bring that up a little bit just to make a bit more of the fireworks. So how are we looking? There's before, there's after, before, after. Quite like it. Let's just have a quick look. Yeah, let's go into here and just dehaze this a little bit. That's just going to help with the house. Don't need any vignette. So I don't know why I picked that. Clarity, that's what I want. I'm just going to bring out a bit of information just to make these a little bit sharper. There we go. That looks pretty good. So just select this. There we go. So before, after, before, after. There we go. All right. That's just a few quick edits. Hope you've enjoyed that. There will be more to come. I'll do these in a future video. Thanks very much for joining me today. You can always reach out with any questions that you might have. And it's a nice little cool experiment. I'll be sure to do one again soon. All right, bye for now.